A very good evening to all of you and welcome to the 33rd webinar on ICFAI's WiseViews interactive webinar series. This evening we have a very distinguished guest, Mr. Tmi Muralidharan, who has joined us. Most welcome, sir. Welcome to this webinar series, Leadership Conversations.
Thank you.
We are extremely privileged and honored to have you with us. I'm very happy that you have given us time. And ladies and gentlemen, today Mr. Muralidharan is going to talk about people performance consulting. What I will do is I'll quickly share my screen and do the introduction, a brief introduction rather. So as I said, Mr. Muralidharan is speaking on people performance consulting. This is a 1-hour session. First 15 minutes, we request Mr. Muralidharan to deliver his talk, followed by 45 minutes of Q&A, which is moderated by me and by Professor Prasad, my esteemed colleague. We have allocated a lot of time for question and answers, and that will be more interesting with Mr. Muralidharan being around. Yes, this is a very interesting picture. Brief introduction, Mr. Muralidharan is an alumnus of IIT Madras and IIM Ahmedabad. He has also finished his program in law recently from Osmania University. Additionally, he has been accredited by Telangana government as an independent journalist since 2015. He is a regular columnist on careers, jobs, and skills for the Hindu Opportunities, the Hindu Education Plus, Telangana Today, The Week Magazine, Enadu, Navbharat Times, Sakshi, so on and so forth, all prestigious publications. Mr. Muralidharan is the founder, as I mentioned, founder and chairman of Tmi Group, which is a pan-India group now with more than 3,000 employees. They also have customers in Japan, Germany, Middle East, Africa, Singapore, and Central Asia. Tmi Group has placed over 1 lakh of managers and skilled over 2 lakh executives in the Indian corporate sector till now over the last 3 decades. Mr. Muralidharan is very active in FICCI. He is the chairman of FICCI Telangana State Council, where I am also a member. He is also the member of National Executive Board of FICCI. He is also a former member of the National Board of MSME constituted by the Ministry of MSME. Recently, he was nominated as a member of the expert committee to Group of Ministers of Government of India. In addition, he is an advisor to the Governor of Rajasthan on MSME and employment since April 2020. Today, Mr. Muralidharan is going to talk about some of the interesting things that TMI does and more focusedly on people performance consulting. So without wasting much time, I would like to now invite Mr. Muralidharan. Over to you, sir, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sudhakar. It's always a pleasure. ICFAI, I think you not mentioned one part. I was in the board of ICFAI. Early part of my time, and I've got phenomenally positive association with ICFAI. And I think we run a school now, which was run by your founder. I'm part of Udbhav School, 2 schools which you took over from the foundation which you was running earlier, SSV. And I have very fond memories of SSV making chai for me. Whenever you go there, he has an elaborate procedure of pouring chai and then giving it to you. So he's always a wonderful memories of SSV, and he's a great soul. May his soul rest in peace. And so I'm very delighted to be here today. I'm going to share my screen now. I think I'll continue my conversation. I think today's, I'm going to open up a new idea. I think this topic came about for 30 years, TMI has been in HR space. I came without any HR qualification into a space. I was more from marketing, and it's been a very delightful experience for me because I know today 400 HR professionals in the country. Good recent one. So I've been in the last 30 years, I have met about 400 plus HR professionals, right from Satyanarayana Garu was one of the few people I met early in part of my life. And what's happening now? I've been meeting very, very wide variety of HR professionals from multiple industries. We have hired for TCS on IT in one end to manufacturing giants in India. We also hired a lot of people in the BFSI sector. So the versatility of my experience has been very useful. And when I reflected on my past 30 years, what did I accomplish in TMI? And one of the interesting things is also intertwined with my understanding of what is HR function. So recently I was asked to speak in one of the NHRD conferences, and I picked up a topic called Future of Work. And it's a revealing research. At the end of the day, I came back with a very strong feeling that these are the most discontinuous periods in the history of my experience of 30 years, right? So the 30 years of experience, when I look back at HR, and I thought there was one blind spot which I found, and which is what I'm going to speak about, which is what is called people performance analytics and modeling. To begin with, I think I want to talk about a book which has influenced me the most. It's called Edward de Bono's book on New Thinking for the New Millennium. It was published around 2000. One of the interesting things you said about history of human civilization is that a lot of things have changed around us, but our brain has not changed. Our human behavior has not changed. So he said that, maintained that the thinking of the last millennium was too much concerned about what is rather than what can be. This is very, very important, because what is all about analytics. I mean, what is, how did things happen? What is the relationship? But what can be is in the domain of predictive analytics. And I think one of the major transition HR will have to make going forward has to be about what will be, or what can be, or what will be the prediction. We need to go into the domain. So if you look at history of, again, HR, you will realize performance management has two meanings. For the line manager, it means that how do I get performance from my team in the current quarter or in the current month? But you have to look at HR professionals. Performance management for them was annual performance review or quarterly performance review. And their job was to manage the process, not the outcome. Now, this is actually what I'm talking about. On one side, we have a very myopic operational view of performance management from the line manager who manages the performance. On the other side, HR was more concerned about the process of performance management rather than performance management. So in the process, I think it fell between the stools. And that's why I'm going to demonstrate today how this is a blind spot. And this is going to be probably the most important task of HR. So before we go in, as a quick introduction to TMI Group since 1991, and I will be talking towards the end about TMI 2.0, where we are going as a company. But this is, in summary, we are a very, very large company in hiring, large company in training. Recently, we did a very major project for Government of India, where we trained a lot of Anganwadi workers, about 8 lakh people, or 0.8 million. So whatever you say about TMI, two things are clear. We are very, very diversified in terms of geographies in India. We work pan-India, we work in large numbers. So a lot of this experiences has brought us down into one understanding of what do we do as far as the sales force is concerned. Because this is the largest set of people in any organization, especially service organization, what we call field force. And we are the only company in India which has done a maximum amount of work, right from employer branding to mobilization to assessment to onboarding. So we are an only integrated productivity consulting analytics company all this while. And that has given us some amount of insights into what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to present a lot of case studies, of actual case studies, so that we can absorb what I'm trying to say. These are the 4 practices. We are value-added staffing, we are a large-scale RPO company, we are a learning science company, and we do a lot of thick data analytics, which I'll present today. We do about 500,000 connects every year. Some of them are structured, some of them are unstructured, a lot of anecdotal data. So we have suddenly realized in the last few years, we are deluged with data. And therefore, our entire thought process has changed from trying to apply theory of HR into what data is telling us. And that is today's story for you. So the presentation covers in 4 parts. What is the context for people performance analytics and management? PPAM stands for people performance analytics and management. What is the context? What are the concepts? What are the benefits? And what is our approach with some case studies? So at the end of this, you will get an idea that this is a very emerging area in HR, and it's got a lot of insights which we need to pick up from this, which is probably counterintuitive to what HR professionals think and believe. First, the 4 biggest trends of all times, forever, we are going to see 4 trends. One is automation. Everybody's doing it in a big way. To give you an example, in TMI, we have built about 40 bots already, and we are targeting to make our company a very, very advanced bot company for automation. So most of the services, repetitive tasks will get automated. McKinsey published a very interesting report some time ago where they talked about more than 50% of the jobs will have a significant portion of automation in it. So automation is disrupting the way work is going to be done. That is first point. The second one is work from home. Last week, I was talking to some of the IT companies. They're all struggling to get people back to work because many of them are comfortable working from home. But this has disrupted the connection between the employer and the employee. And this is a concern area which we need to address. I asked one of the senior HR professionals, what is his number one problem now? But he said, I don't think we know the employee anymore. And therefore, our biggest challenge is whatever we have built relationship, we have to rebuild. So that is going to be one of our biggest challenges. Right? Third is new employment models. We are going to see a lot of gig working, contracting. Again, to give an example, TMI, we have about 300, 350 employees, full-time employees, but we have about 800 to 1,000 gig workers working for us. In other words, our composition of workforce already changed away from full-time employees to of people who are more in part-time, more in contract, more in gig working. And this means a lot to the way we are going to look at HR in going forward. And the last one, which is the most important, the young people of today are very, very, very different. Everybody has said, every generation has already claimed that the next generation is always difficult. But I personally feel that this what we are going to see now. People are born post 1990. Young people don't want to listen to their bosses. So this is our number one problem. That means the way of transfer of knowledge, learning that happened in companies are going to change. Now this brings us to the blind spot, what you talked about. The consequence of all of them has been a huge variation in performance, and I will demonstrate it later on with little more data. But there is for the first time, I realized that the variation in performance between top performer and bottom performer in any cohort is a matter of great analytics, a great amount of research, so that we can reduce it. Now, this is the first thing I want to talk about. This is a very unique plot. I don't think you'd have ever seen this plot, and most of you are in this audience today. The individual dots are every single person's data. On the x-axis, going from right to left, is what we call residency in the company. That means how long the person has stayed in the company. And on the vertical axis is his average cumulative productivity. Now, each dot represents one combination of a person's data on his achievement vis-a-vis his residency or stay. Now, if you can see, there are multiple quadrants here, quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the dream of every company is to have people in high achievement and longer stay. Surprise, surprise, if you see the Q1 quadrant, it's only 92 out of 585. Less than maybe 10, 15% of the people are in the high, this required quadrant. But look at the bottom, Q3. People are low achievement, but long stay. These are the so-called non-performers who are hanging on in the system. They are double the size almost, so 1.5 times, 1.5 times the size of the quadrant 1. Now, what is this graph? This is the first time we've been able to plot attrition versus productivity in a single graph. And I'm going to talk about it a little later, but please note one line, black line, which you can see here. The line is basically on a single, on this cohort. If you take people who are in the same residency, look at the variation in performance. The black line shows you the top and bottom. And on the right, you can see that the variation is anywhere between 19x to 16x times if you knock out all the outliers. Now, this is the number one issue now in productivity. We are suddenly realizing that employees' diversity of performance means that the loss to the company. This is actually what I call manpower waste, because the low performers are a drag, their salary is a drag, and we will try and address this little more greater detail later on. After I saw the McKinsey story, and I started looking at this across multiple industry, FMCG industry, the first line, the second one is retail assets in a bank, retail liabilities in a bank, and life insurance. Look at the variation, 9x to 84x, 35x to 75x. My God, I never looked at data this way, and this has been mind-blowing, because what we are saying now, in the same cohort with the same level of experience in the company, Some people are at 84 times, and other one is 9 times. There's a range of based on the residency of the people. This is very scary because how can a company not recognize this? How can a company not look at it seriously? And I'll talk about it. What is the reason for this, right? First and foremost, we picked up the Flame workforce as the main target because Flame is the largest number of people in any company. Flame stands for frontline executives and managers. They contribute between 50% and 60% in most of the service organization. They are in sales, customer service, and back office. And the performance variation of Flame in the same cohort, but in the same role, same vintage, same entry criteria is huge. And that is why we are looking at this today's presentation on people performance consulting. Many times supervisors' performance reviews are very, very shallow. They don't tell them what their problem is, what are the root cause of the non-performance, but they keep on pushing them. And the consequences on their companies are very, very high. For example, this variation is only a symptom. What is the root cause? How does performance really happen on the ground? Do anybody know? From my experience, we have been doing a lot of work in this frontline executives and performance. Many people think they know, but actually what really happens on the ground, they don't know. So PPM is a very unique concept, which is the analytics of the correlation between actual output performance and various positive factors. Some of them are obvious, many of them are not obvious. So PPM tries to connect the performance dots, visible and not visible. It's a mathematical and a statistical relationship. Traditionally, HR has not been very comfortable with a lot of statistics, but this is the first time we have brought them into one framework and see what is the mathematical relationship or statistical relationship. And the last portion is important. Data tells you a different story than what we have always believed to be true. And I will demonstrate that later on. It's a very complex subject. It has many factors associated with performance. The causative factors could be internal to the employee, internal to the organization, external to the organization, but it believes it requires a lot of competencies in data sciences to be able to see what you don't see. And that's what is the story of today's presentation. It provides a great opportunity if you get it right, if you do it properly. It's a great opportunity for performance enhancement and an opportunity to reduce the gap between high performance and low performance. Some of the benefits of PPM, clearly, we have to relook at everything, right? From performance reviews, performance targeting, how do you look at hiring, how do you look at incentive policy? It has a great influence on induction training, upskilling, deployment, every single thing of HR, other than to some extent compensation. These also linked to this, but performance management in the sense that it has an impact on everything. For example, how does hiring relate to performance? I think the answer is very simple. Why do you hire people? Because you want them to perform. If people are not performing, or a certain set of people are performing, some certain people are not performing, our job in HR is to try and lay a straw profile based on who's performing, and therefore make sure more of such people come into the company. So ultimately, whether it's training or hiring, it's all linked to performance. So what we are going to say now is to talk about a several stage process. If you really want to do performance modeling, the first step is data gathering. You need to curate the data. Curate the data means you have to remove the outliers, remove a lot of duplication of data. Then you have to visualize the data. This is very important. And we will talk about some visualization techniques later on. But visualization actually gives you some insights on the data. And then when you visualize with a drill down model, you come back with some counterintuitive hypothesis. And then you build an analytical model, which is an algorithm, and try and see that any correlation exists and how to the reliability of the data. So this is the core of the new data science-based performance modeling. And let's give some examples now. I think I've explained the concept now. Quickly, I'm going to take you through some case studies for you to understand. The first one is, how do you disaggregate data? How aggregate data do not tell the story. The real story is in the bottom. So this is the graph of 585 people's cumulative performance month on month. As you can see, October to May. This is the graph of the cumulative performance of 585. If a CEO looks at it, he's going to say, yeah, okay, we're doing all right. We have done some standard, some 1 or 2 months we have peaked, but we are okay. We are uploading around 110%. I'm happy with this. That's what he will say. But let's drill down and see. When you drill down this data, there are big surprises. On the right-hand side top is the graph of individuals who contributed to this cumulative data. And on the left, top left, is actually you break them into 5 cohorts of different productivity, 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, and see how they are performing. Now, the left-hand side, actually top bottom, left-hand side top bottom is a scary story. What it says is, even though the average across all peoples have been stable, there is a large number of underperformers who are consistently underperforming. And that's what the lower graphs are showing on the top left. And then you look at data of individuals, high performers and low performers. Everybody has got a lot of noise. Nobody is consistently performing. Some of them performing up and down and up and down. Now, this is the first time we were able to look at individual data and put them into an aggregation. So the aggregation is the problem because it hides more than the truth. The reality is actually what you see in the right-hand side bottom. And the bottom on the top is what you see on the top, right? And that's actually a very stable curve. So what are we saying? What we are saying is the performance, when you look at any kind of a company and you this kind of high variation in performance, it goes back to ask a question. Many companies ask people to leave, employees to leave because they're not performing. But if you have to ask a scientific question, when do we ask employee to leave? If the performance is zigzagging all the time, how do you predict he's not going to recover? What is the basis on which you will come to a conclusion on how much is the lead time you should give to an employee before you declare him to be an unproductive employee? Now, this is what we are going to see here. It's a company which is selling asset products in a bank, large bank, and the data shows that large performance variation was there month on month. And this is the data. As you can see, the thick curve is the average data, and the data which is a black one or the aggregate data of cohorts of various groups, and the individual data is in mild form in the background. So that's a chaos, what we call a chaos in the performance, right? Now, when we went down and analyzed the data, suddenly we realized that the company used to have a policy that if somebody does not perform in 3 months, we'll ask him to go. But when we pulled down this data and looked at 2 product categories they were selling, some set of people selling personal loans and some set of people housing loans, we suddenly realized the home loans require at least 6 months. M6 is the 6th month after training that we did. It took 6 months for majority of the cohort to reach 107% of productivity. Whereas personal loans, they reached that much faster in approximately the 3rd month. Now, what this story is that you cannot generalize how many months is the lead time you should give an employee. It varies on what products you sell, and this could vary from time to time. So we have to draft or derive this answer to the question, how long should you wait, only from data. And the data tells you there are different product categories have different timelines. The second is a very interesting case study. A customer told to us, can you please tell us how do we predict the performance of our managers? We always are used to the performance system that we have right now. It's a lag indicator. We know that last month he did very well. But can you tell us, can you do better than next month? Can you develop a model algorithm to correlate his current performance on lead indicators and his future performance? So this was a very, very interesting study we did for a bank. And if you can see from here, these are the variables that we took while studying the performance of the branch sales manager. BSM stands for branch sales manager. These were some of the variables we took into the equation. And this was the equation we tested. These are the various variables and the regression equation. And finally, after multiple options, various combinations, this is the final conclusion we reached. 44% of the standard deviation of the performance came from the deviation, average monthly dispersion of performance of people reporting to him. Now, I want to stop here and I want you to understand what I'm saying. Traditionally, you say BSM sales performance is linked to the performance of his team as a whole. What this graph was showing, what this analytics was showing, no, it is only doesn't tell you that it not give you predictability of his performance. Predictability will come between how much of the variation between the top performer and bottom performer reporting to him. That is more important. Similarly, is attrition. What is the variation of attrition? Now, what we are saying here is exactly what a BSM is supposed to do. He's supposed to reduce the gap between performance, focus on the non-performers. But unfortunately, in many of the companies, these managers focus on the winners, not on the losers. And therefore, the gap between performance went up. So this is a very powerful model because this will determine how you will evaluate employees now. This is one of the data which we give it back to them. So the third question was, can you predict if good employee, when is he likely to leave? Every HR guy wants to know. So this problem was again presented by a multinational company saying that, can you give us some predictive analytics on when an employee is going to leave? And we had some insights, and then we looked at one very interesting data point. And this data point said that if a person was unauthorized leave for more than 3 days in a sequence, the probability of leaving the company was very high. Now here is a unrelated data point. For example, number of days unauthorized leave. But when you put that predictive analytics model together, suddenly we realized there's a high correlation between unauthorized leave and quitting. And what it meant for us immediately was we immediately started a program of calling the employees on the second day itself to find out what is the problem and how we can solve. And this brought down the attrition significantly. So this is again a very important point. The intention to quit, people are forming in their mind. And this intention to quit is visible in certain behavior. And if you're able to study the behavior and extrapolate and find out the intention to quit is there, we can prevent it. We can, in some cases, we can even start about hiring process even faster to backfill. So this is an interesting thing. The fourth one is a bigger question we were asked that, okay, we want to study and understand how do you do performance enhancement? That means how do you provide training? How do you link training to performance enhancement? And can you really tell us that when is the time a person should go for training? When should require retraining? And this again was a data. So what we did was we took a cohort of 585 people in the same graph I showed you earlier. And these were the 6 quadrants, and they were before the training, when they came for training. There's 585 people, 92 people were before training in the quadrant Q1. And when you moved it to the post-training space, the pre-training was this is the data. And when you looked at the insurance claim data for the same data for the people, the variation, again, I told you last time, was a huge variation between 10 times to 46 times. The interesting point when this was the performance variation was declining as the residency increased, which is really making a case for reducing attrition in companies. So the conclusion was when performance variation of the cohort who joined in the same time and same entry criteria is very huge, and there is a direct correlation between residency and the case for retention for employees. I'm learning this, okay. Number 5, the last case study, I think last 2 case studies, I'm going to close with this. The other question was asked that, is it possible for us to figure out measurement of performance and increase in performance post-training? And can any data analytics can be done? So this was a cohort of 15,000 people, and they were spread over 2 years. This is the various types of products they were selling. And this is the data of them before they came for training. 585 people, 92 people were in the preferred quadrant. And let's see what happened post-training. Post-training, the quadrant doubled to 181, which is a quick measure of whether your training is working or not. And next slide. And this is an interesting graph. I want to spend one minute on this. It is a graph of the productivity, average productivity, as they started from month 1, month -4. M0 is the month they came for training. And as you can see, the graph moving up on the right as the time period went, as the number of months post-training. But as you can see, it is already plateauing at some point of time. And therefore, this is the period on which retraining has to be done. The data shows that, in the month 4 to month 5, we have to look at some kind of a retraining. But even more interesting is on the left-hand side, if you see, even without training, performance were improving from 26% to 43%, and then it started declining. What it says is data shows that instead of sending people on the first month for training, it might even be worthwhile to look at the second month or third month of training, because they're anyway learning something on the job with existing without training itself. So these are some of the questions now we handle in terms of when to send a person for training, when to send him for upskilling. Now the data tells us a very, very different story than what we believe. So I think, in summary, if you were to ask me what has been my learning, I feel that there are 7 steps. If you really want to enhance performance of our teams, first you have to start with performance analytics and visualization. This is something we have not done before. The second is called performance modeling, which is the relationship between input and output. It could be statistical, it could be based on Excel analytics, but ultimately the second step is to do some modeling based on what the visualization hypotheses are. Then the third one is to define some measurable metrics. Many of them are lead indicators which we need to measure the intrics, and then start looking at the real-time measurement and data wrangling. Data wrangling means that you curate the data and clean up the data, and then you look at the root cause, identification of non-performance. Then you do real-time learning so that you can correct the non-performance. And last, you have to create an enabling environment for them to practice that learning so that their performance improve. This cycle of a 7-step process, which we outlined, is what TMI is now promoting, and we believe this is the basis on which performance enhancement is going to happen. In the past, to give you a comparison, there used to be something called training and need analysis. Based on the training need analysis, people came up with some skills and they trained people on skills and then hoped that performance happened. Now, this is not the way, in my mind, things are going to happen going forward. So I think at the end of the day, it is now possible to measure performance improvement. You can calculate return on investment. You can find out when the training, how long the training lasts. We can find out when the training should begin. And all these questions now, data is telling us a story. And I think that is what I would encourage many of our participants here to focus and learn more from the data. So top 3 myths about people performance. Till now, we have always believed that skilling automatically leads to performance. Answer is no. Skilling does not lead to performance. Skilling is still 1 step away from performance. Only a customized role-based, task-based training helps. Generic skilling does not. For example, generic selling skills was a training on critical subtask of a sales role. There's a huge difference in performance impact. Second, experts and bosses know the performance insights the best. The answer is no. They don't know. They don't know what's happening on the ground. Only the peers, performing peers, seem to know what is happening on the ground, and therefore future learning models will be revolving around extracting from peers. What do they know? What's happening on the ground? And the last myth is about line manager's job is to extract performance, and HR role is not there. But actually, HR role has to be a joint responsibility. HR has to design and model the performance, and the line manager must execute. They are work in partnership. And to my mind, this is going to be the centerpiece of HR going from next 5 years and 10 years from now. Next slide. So in closing remarks, I just want to say that TMI 2.0, going next 20, 30 years, our focus will be on using data science, bringing data science into people performance analytics and consulting, and trying to build solutions which are basically based on what is happening on the ground and bring corrective action. So in conclusion, making people performance decisions based on yesterday's data and yesterday's hypothesis is outdated. People decisions must be made in the future based on rich data, AI-based visualizations, performance modeling, and corrective actions should be based on root causes of non-performance. This is what I want to say. Again, I want to thank you for your patience. I'm going to stop the share and then we can have some Q&A questions.
No, sir, it's been fantastic. What I'm really amazed about is the fact that you have covered a huge landscape in such a short span of time. You started with your comment on the human behavior, how it has not changed for so long, and the focus on what is and not what can be. I think that is the premise on which everything else has been built. And also the role of HR traditionally has been to manage the process and not the outcome. And therefore, you have kind of created a new agenda and a role, a meaningful role that partners with all the managers, which is a joint responsibility for outcomes in the organization. Otherwise, HR traditionally has not been a very significant partner to this kind of success stories that the organizations write. But this emerging area in HR, which you're talking about in terms of people performance, I'm very, very sure is going to startle many people. I'm quite delighted that the models that you have used and the statistical data that you have shown in terms of the case studies is also very, very interesting. In brief, the productivity versus residency, one single graph is something that has actually blown me off. That is fantastic. A lot of discussion can happen actually. The scope of this particular webinar in terms of the time is just not sufficient for covering so many case studies. Otherwise, I should have asked for a longer duration from you. But anyway, we'll live with this. And without wasting any more time in summarizing, I want to say that this has been very, very useful. We'll dedicate most of the time for questions and answers. I'll request Professor Prasad to come in, and also we will will cater more time for responses from the speaker than asking the question itself. So quickly breeze through. May I now request Professor Prasad to start the moderation.
Thank you very much, Professor Rao. I think this is a very new dimension of research and practice that you have highlighted, and it has come to us as direct data. There are a lot of questions which we have aggregated, and many of them are, they're not exactly data driven, but they are trying to understand the theme a bit better. So I think I'll start from a completely different space, and the space is what we are overall interested in. It's about, can you please share your entrepreneurial journey, your motivations, and how you chose the businesses that you're in?
Very interesting question. I think Sudhakar also knows I'm a great believer that I should stay relevant in whatever I do. That has been my motto in life. I came into entrepreneurship thinking I'll be an agricultural specialist. I started in TMI as a seed company. We failed in 1991. So the first failure has been the greatest success of my life, because it brought down IIT, IIM, all the ego, everything got finished in the first 3 years of failure. So then I built TMI again in an area which I'm comfortable with, human behavior. So all our businesses are around recruiting, training, skilling, learning science. I would say that TMI is one of the few companies which understand learning as a science rather than as a practice. So I think my choices in life has always come from two angles. One, being relevant, and sometimes they are driven by customers' choices. Many times customers have pushed us to do some new businesses. Even the current thing I'm talking about, it's come about because of 6 or 7 projects we did for various customers. And all of them came out to be a lot of counterintuitive data came out. So I've been driven largely by what my customer wants. That's how we have come where we are.
Thank you. So I think the driven by customers has led you also to learning as a science, and I think you have incorporated it into how you've done it.
Yes, that's right.
Through all this kind of research that you've done with leading organizations, what are the key factors that you have found for, human behavior is so diverse. What are the key factors that you have found for human performance? Can you illustrate some of them?
See, I think traditional motivation models on performance has always been money. I think you ask any HR person, if things are not working out, think of some performance incentive scheme. That's what we used to think. I think for me, for the first time, I'm beginning to believe that performance is a very complex subject of causative factors. Like I showed you one graph, there are some 32 factors were there. When we put into the equation to study which are the highest impact on performance. And interestingly, the two data which came out, 44% explanation came from 2 items that are not compensation driven. So for me, I think we are going to see a time frame where the future of performance will be driven by individual designs and desires. And organizations have to stop doing aggregation. The more aggregation you see, the less you understand what's happening on the ground. So the motivation for performance for people, some people it comes because they're competitive. Some people want reward and recognition in the companies. So there are many, many factors which determine. But the interesting point is what the data tells you is ultimately the truth. Everything else is an opinion. So that's what I've learned. I had a lot of theories on performance, the causative factors. So now I come to only one conclusion. Whatever I think I know, whatever I think it is true, most likely, unless data tells me, validate it, I have to believe it is not true. So in summary, I would say performance of people become a complex subject now. And we need to understand, cut and dice at various levels and try and understand motivation from the way the actual practice happens on the ground, which is what data tells you.
Excellent. I think that goes in the direction that the world is also going. I think you're basically saying that context matters.
Yes.
It's not just generalization. Context matters a lot. And finally, it is driven by individual design. And I think, therefore, at the end of the day, personalization, personas, and customization is going to matter. The third question in this cluster is related to, again, it is slightly generic, but since you've seen so many programs, so many kind of people, staff what are the challenges involved in unlocking a person's competencies?
Competency, that's the question, of performance? The question is linked to competency.
Yes.
You see, I think traditionally our belief was to create an enabling environment to extract competency. I think that's what we call culture, we call organizational context. But I think now the external influence on competency development or exhibition of competency, I think it's moving inwards now. It is going to be more driven by what the person wants to do. For example, gig workers. I asked myself a question. I have a 300 full-time employees, 700 gig workers who contribute to my business success. What motivates them? What makes them the best trainer or the best assessor, which is the business we are in, right? Is it because the assessment of the competency, assessor of the competency is coming because I'm demanding, or because they want to be the best in the business, right? In gig worker space, we realized people are driven by their own desire to be the best or to be something very special. And therefore, the future of competency extraction will be largely driven by internal motivation, segregation, the cutting and dice, and figuring out better ways of extraction. It will not be driven by, we all think that we can play them, we can make them dance by providing incentive program, promotion policies, sending them overseas. Not many thought processes we have, but I think they are going to be far less important.
So this sounds a lot like nurturing, understanding and then nurturing.
Yes.
So it gets back to the same personalization, customization kind of direction that we are looking at.
Yeah, in fact, originally I used to call this like we have a customer of one, we have a learner of one, now we have an employee of one. I think companies have to recognize that each and every employee is different. And if you want to aggregate them, don't put your own theories.
Building on that further, and which is also related to the next question, how does this relate to organization culture, where there again, there is a kind of something that the organization does its own values. So how do you plan and align that, or is there no alignment? How do you build it?
No, I think the culture is going to be relevant to only 20% of the employees, because they will be the only permanent work from office environment. 80% of the employees 10 years from now will be working from home, working as gig workers, part-time workers, contract workers. So the concept of culture is influence on 100% of the employees will come down to 20%. So that's the first thing we can recognize. So the second part is that what influences culture, in my mind, I've always believed in it, is number one, leadership behavior. If you look at any business, I think Yashasvi is a good example. I always admired him for that. He's a great leader. He led from the front in whatever he did. So leadership, especially the people at the helm of affairs, how they behave, actually how the action items, they will determine culture for the 20% of the people. Because they are the long-term players. They want to stay in the company. They have intention, and they're going to be driven largely by leadership.
I think that's a very contrarian view, and I think that's relevant from what you're saying about culture, may be relevant to a far lesser extent than how it is currently positioned. Yes. And I think the leadership point is something that is getting emphasis all over the world today. Thank you very much. I think I come to the end of this cluster. I hand it back to Professor Rao.
Sir, we have actually aggregated the questions that we collected from various participants and then clustered into different sets based on consistency and relevance. So I'll now quickly pick up the second one. This is about the tools and methods that we have. What we have studied and read about is a balanced scorecard. So balanced scorecard as a tool in performance appraisal, how is it and is it relevant, and your comments on that?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, balanced scorecard doesn't make any sense for flame workforce. Flame workforce is all the largest number of people, what we call as frontline executives and managers. The balanced scorecard makes sense for a middle and senior level of companies. So that's the first point I wanted to say that. The second, I think the bigger question is balanced scorecard is exactly what we've been saying, lead indicators and lag indicators. Has to be built in a performance management system. You cannot talk about financial performance, which is always a lag indicator, right? You talk about last month, how much turnover you did, what are the orders you picked up. So now the balanced scorecard gives a much more balanced view of the present or the past, present, and the future. So it's important to build the balanced scorecard very carefully. And again, this is important. I just want to emphasize this point. There are always the four components of balanced scorecard. There is a customer, there's a process, there's a people, etc. But these are all developed long time ago. I think we need to revisit in a balanced scorecard. I would redefine them as lead and lag indicators. What are the lead indicators? What are the lag indicators of company's performance? And how do you build them into a performance framework? And that's, I think, is to me the basis. For example, we used to argue that if you spend a lot of time on process side, it will lead to performance. If you do a lot of emphasis on people development, it will lead to performance. Now, these assumptions of correlations have to be retested now. You know, many companies which are people-centric don't perform. Many people are process-centric, don't perform. So I think the assumption of the 4-quadrant model of a typical performance balanced scorecard will have to be revisited and examined from the standpoint of the relevance in the current context. And to me, the most important thing in all of them is that how much emphasis we are able to give to employees to recognize their performance quickly enough, and don't penalize the good performer because you want to carry a bad performer. Like I told you about blind spot in HR. If there is a variation of 12x or 14x between the top performer and bottom performer, what does it mean? The top performer is carrying the bottom performer. Why should he do that? And the more and more I believe that, in fact, sometimes it's very controversial. The HR is always used to believe that don't differentiate between people, right? Treat all employees the same. I'm saying the future will come where you have to learn to differentiate a performer and non-performer. And that is going to be the number one basis for any performance management system. Recognize them early, reward them proportionately, and identify the non-performers and give them a chance to come pump up their performance. Obviously, idea is not to throw them out, but you ought to call the devil quickly enough so that you can correct them. Otherwise, the good performers will leave the company. And we are seeing that in IT industry now. Very significantly, attrition rates have gone up to 50%. And there's a huge pressure on IT companies to retain talent now. Because they've always felt that why am I carrying the cross for the non-performers in the company?
Great. I think you're suggesting that we need to revisit the balanced scorecard, and the focus should be on lead indicators and lag indicators, and the ability to help employees recognize their individual performance, and also differentiate lead performers versus the lag performers. And that's what the role of HR should be, rather than the traditional way of not being able to or not willing to differentiate among the employees. So very pertinent. Thank you, sir. The second question.
Just one small thing I would like to add is that the whole focus is going to shift to predictive performance, which means what? The lead indicators tell you these guys are likely to perform, and therefore incentivize them now to deliver the performance. Now, what do? You incentivize him for delivering performance last quarter.
Right.
That's what you do in a normal traditional model. But today, if I can predict this cohort of people will be able to perform better, or likely to perform better. Now, my job is to retain them. My job is to give them enough motivation so they deliver the predictive performance. So there's changing from the past to the future.
Absolutely. The focus in the future, the ability to predict the performance and then focus on that and make sure that they are retained at any cost, and make them useful for the organization's overall growth. Fantastic. So the second question is, we talked in the context of what we are discussing, we talked about certain correlations and things like that. For example, attrition and performance. What are the other metrics that we can look together? For example, in terms of correlation, in terms of looking at together, for example, attrition and performance. If your performance is not really good, and then if there is discouragement from your manager or boss, then the attrition will happen. I mean, traditionally speaking.
Yeah.
What are such other things that we need to look at?
I gave you the example in the study of the managers. How do you define managers' performance? Managers' performance is not measured by how well these people are doing. It's more defined by how well these people are not doing. Because when you talk about diversity of performance between the high performer and low performer, the focus is on what people are not doing in this team, right? So this is a different correlation. We've never thought of that correlation before. We always thought people are performing aggregate data. It shows very good. He's a good performer. So when I said resiliency, attrition is actually aggregate data. There's no like an individual attrition, but resiliency is an individual data. Right? So that's how we brought resiliency, and for the first time, we could build this plot together. And that opened up our mind completely on different ways of looking at data. So to me, what are the other hidden analytical tools? Many of them come from, I gave you an example of attrition coming from 3 days of unplanned leave, right? Now, this actually was very surprising for us because this company had employees who were more than 8 years, 7 years, were leaving with 3 days kind of unplanned data. So I only want to say this, that I am not going to predict any more correlations of any data, any factors. It should come from the data, and be prepared to look for unconventional data, unconventional factors, which can really throw out that correlation better. So I am only warning that, saying that I am any presupposed knowledge or any predilection or a preference for some hypothesis may be a surprise. It may not be true.
Oh, great. So it's actually very, very profound. What you're saying is that conventionally we have our own biases and we look for certain data based on those biases. But now we should be ready for that unconventional data. And I think completely your decision should be based on these statistics or these sets of data that is coming to the extent possible. It can be personalized, it can be individualized, and the reading has to be done there. And that is the role of the bosses or the managers than what is currently being looked at. Fantastic, sir. Another question is about how do we monitor performance of employees who are working from home?
See, I think it's a very interesting point. We have been discussing, even as our majority of the employees till recently, we had only 5% of employees coming for 2 years to office. And interestingly, performance did not suffer because of people working from home in the initial period. Except for one of the businesses where we want people to come to office, we are comfortable with many of the employees working from home. Right? Now, the problem with working from home, and I think conventionally, all of us defined employee loyalty, employee hard work by the time we came to office and what time we left. Right? Many companies used to have an attendance system to see what time we came, what time, how many hours you put in, and you put in 12 hours is a hardworking guy. This is how our mind. Right? We're also driven by what we see is what we believe. If an employee was half the time working late in the office, it seems to be a very good guy. He must be hardworking. These are the assumptions. But in a working from home, these data are not available to you. You don't know what time he starts work, what time he closes work, right? So one of the things which we have discovered is in the work from home era, we need to build a lot of daily metrics. And the daily metrics could be, for example, in our company, we talk about a calendar system. Every employee should have a calendar. They should publish their calendar, what they're going to do in the beginning of the day. And at the end of the day, they need to fill up what actually they did. And there has to be a lot of analytics based on what the output they produce on a daily basis. So what work from home will do to give you comfort is that you need to reduce the cycle time for assessment of performance from quarterly, monthly to as little as 1 day. Because you don't know what the employee is doing at home. And I don't know, many of you may be aware, one of the biggest challenges in IT industry today is most of the employees are doing 2 jobs. And this has become very, very rampant now. And one of the reasons why employees don't want to go back to office is because they're doing 2 jobs right now. Right?
Sorry, sir?
They're doing 2 jobs. Many of the employees in IT industry are doing 2 jobs now. Right? Which is not possible sitting in the office. So they're all preferably working from home. So my point was that we as an organization will have to go beyond our conventional thinking. People are self-motivated. People do whatever they want. No, I need to measure now. I need to find simple measurement which will tell me on a daily basis what outcomes are happening. They should get aggregated. We need to build dashboards based on who are the people who are not delivering whatever they're supposed to do on a daily basis so that they can intervene early to prevent any mishaps on the performance. Right? So the only point I want to say is that measurement will increase. Employees may not like it. Many of the employees don't like to be monitored. I think including you and me, I also don't like to be monitored. but that is going to be the way forward.
Well, the difficult solution that you have given is the daily metrics and systems to actually measure and monitor on a daily basis if they are working from home. Not just this is applicable for IT organizations, but all kinds of organizations. We need to create these dashboards and see what kind of output they have been able to bring to the table on daily basis, so that the performance appraisal is now, that cycle is now cut short to even a day, not just 6 months or 3 months, which is conventionally. So a lot of conventional wisdom has been questioned in your responses and in your proposition through this discussion, sir. I think it's been fantastic, and I'm enjoying it. I will now hand it over to Professor Prasad to start the next cluster of questions, so that we can quickly ask almost all questions and then try and seek Mr. Muralidharan's response. Professor Prasad.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Rao. I think the first question in this cluster builds on just what we have discussed. So the question is, how accurate is the human performance measurement in reality?
Yeah, I think Santosh Mishra came to our event. He's considered one of the most respected HR professionals in India. And when I spoke about this, and he said, Mr. Muralidharan, I would like to concede that our performance measurement system is the weakest link in the entire HR system. We don't know what we are measuring. We don't know what we should measure. We don't know how we are measuring it. How reliable is the data that we are measuring? So I think it opens up a lot of plethora of questions on what is performance? What is lag indicator of performance? And I'll give you one example. I think it's very interesting for you to know. We looked at our recruiters as a job role. And we did a job analysis, and we broke up the role into tasks, subtasks, and subtasks. There were 125 subtasks a recruiter has to do to be successful in his role, right? So then the next question I asked, are all these 125 subtasks equally important, or is there any hierarchy of tasks? And when we started analyzing using activity-based costing model, we realized that 80% of the cost came from only 9 subtasks. And about 96% of the cost came from only 20 subtasks. So in other words, suddenly what you realize is that your entire measurement system in the input side, for example, when you ask a question, when you work from home, what data should I measure? What should I report? They're only interested in only those subtasks which are high impact on productivity and performance, not every subtask. Otherwise, your performance management system becomes completely complicated. Nobody wants to report so much. So the point is, using mathematical modeling, today we can reduce what we want to measure. And what we want to measure should be completely driven by its highest impact on performance. If you put these two conditions, you suddenly get a lot of interesting data in front of you. So your point is correct. What we measure today is not these 9. We were not measuring those 9 items. We are measuring something else based on conventional wisdom. This is important. Somebody told us this is important. Suddenly we said, no, we are measuring the wrong thing. We should be measuring these 9 items. Right? And then on these 9 items, we were trying to do a leaderboard. Saying who's on the 9 subtasks, who's the best performer, who's the low performer. And there is a big difference between subtask level top performers and bottom performers and overall performance. They're not matching. Right? The overall high performers did some of the subtasks well, some of the tasks they did poorly. Right? So all these ideas of measurement comes because the performance modeling is a process by which you establish the hierarchy of tasks, hierarchy of correlations, which input impacts which output. Lot of relationships can be built. So to me, the performance modeling as a concept is going to be a very crucial thing to determine what we want to measure.
Very insightful. I think that which makes a highest impact on performance is that which you need to dig out and then model around it. Yes.
And historically, the highest impact was measured by opinion, not based on data. And invariably, data tells you a different story. That's what I'm saying. I am extremely shocked. In the last 2 years of COVID time, TMI discovered that I thought, I mean, with a lot of responsibility, I'll say, I thought I was a great HR guy. I understood a lot of things, but I completely come back and said, I know nothing. What I thought is the truth is not the truth anymore. Something else is happening, right? So we need to figure that out. And I think the data is the only God who tells you what's happening. And the moment you discover from there and then build your hypothesis, then more often than not, you can get to the key buttons which you need to press for performance.
Excellent. Now, if this is the base, so we talked about personalization, customization, leadership responsibility, and now we are talking about measuring performance measures. What do you see as the future trend of performance appraisals?
I think performance appraisal will be abolished. It's a waste of time because as a recruiter, I can tell you, we call it the blues period. As soon as the company gives the performance appraisal, 90% of the employees are looking for a job because nobody is happy with performance appraisal. Only guys who are smiling are the guys who got promoted and you got the highest increment. And that is only 10% of the employees. So what we have done in performance appraisal system is to build a lot of secrecy in it, a lot of non-measurability in it, a lot of boss-focused, boss has got a lot of freedom to decide what value you want to put in. And I think in my mind, this is the biggest problem in performance management is because it has been secretive, that is not data-driven. So I think performance management will be replaced. Why do we need performance review system? Is because you want to link it up to increment. You want to link it up to promotability. Promotability is nothing to do with performance. If you ask me, promotability, performance is only, or increments is given for, or incentives are given for past performance. Promotability is the ability to do the next job better, which doesn't guarantee just because you do the current job better, right? There's no correlation between these two. So I think companies will go into more of incentive planning, variable performance pay, and these will be linked to a lot of quantitative data, which will come on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. The payouts will be faster and employees need not have to wait. See, many times our performance management system is seen as a retention policy because you won't give you an increment for 1 year. So everybody relaxes. Let's hope until the increment comes, the employee is also waiting. What will I get? So they can negotiate better. Now, I think performance reviews, and I think Santrup also mentioned the same thing, and many people have also concurred. This is the worst instrument we have created in HR. And only thing which makes all employees unhappy consistently. For example, I've been saying if performance review system is so good, why the boss is not publishing his rating of employees? No boss likes to publish. So other than the employee concern, we say it is secretive. Only employees should know. Why should others not know? If you have a transparent process, right? Everybody should see what the performance rating you're given to everybody else. You should put it on the notice board. No HR guy will put it. No manager will put it because all his idiosyncrasies in the measurement will come. So I think performance management, performance reviews, annual performance reviews is dead. I think it'll go away in a short while time. As gig workers, for example, gig workers, what performance review can you do? Either they are project-based, they come for a task, they finish the task, they get paid and go. So I think that's, and as I said, 20% of the employees will be permanent employees and working with you. 80% will be all floating population. So I don't have great faith in the performance management, performance review system as we follow now, especially annual. It's a joke.
I think that gives clarity on one thing that we should not do, and that is performance appraisal.
No, but not the way you do. I think we have
Not
to
the way
build
you
in
do.
more data. See, I used to say the best performance appraisal system is the employee can calculate his own rating. And he should be able to, each employee should publish it, and we should do relative grading. And if you ask peer review of performance rating, you will really know what the peer review and boss review never matches in any company, right?
Now I come to the technological trends aspect. So much of new technology has come in, which is used industry 4.0 technologies. Now, what kind of technologies do you see which are more relevant and where it will get used more in HR and performance management?
No, I said that very clearly, data science. That's it. Number one technology which will transform everything in HR is data science. Because otherwise, we talk about people behavior, the measurements and activity. For example, one technology we are building on is basically learning technology. See, the important part in all learning processes, including ICFAI, whatever you guys are doing, the factor which is the most important thing which is missed out is motivation to learn, right? We think that everybody is desperate to learn, everybody comes there, they really absorb everything and going. Today, learning technologies really question that assumption. What is the motivation to learn? And therefore, if the motivation is less, if you plot a curve for people coming into a class on their motivation to learn, and we deliver the same style of lectures, the same thing we do to students, obviously the impact is very low. So the next technology, I would say, apart which will really impact is learning technology. We are now looking at a learner of one. I'm working on a very interesting project on micro learning models. I personally believe that the future of learning will be micro learning. It will be adaptive learning, and the technology will create a path, learning path for each and every person in the group. These paths will be different based on assessment. And we are working on, for example, using technology to figure out learners' level and teach them at the learner's level and build them back into a level where you want to go. So great technology changes are coming in learning. And the motivation part is going to come from individuals will now have to own up their own learning. If 80% of the employees are floating population and your job is going to come because gig workers, you're going to come because of your expertise and specialization. So people have to invest their own money. We have spoiled all the employees by saying we will invest on their own. So they have no stakes. Right? I think personally, I believe the future employees will be paid. They have to take a part of their salary, put in their own learning. So the motivation will come from there. And the second part, adaptive technologies will make sure that I learn what I need to know. I don't have to learn what others need to know because everybody is going through the same course, the same sequence, etc., etc. So these two I will pick as one is data science and second is learning technology.
Excellent. I think this is one area where we completely agree with you. I think motivation is far more important than everything else which happens in the class. And if the motivation is there, I think the pull will come to grab what is needed to be there. And the other thing also where we agree is micro learning, the way things are going. So great. I think we come to the end of this cluster. I hand it back to Professor Rao.
Great, sir. We will again get into a cluster where there are some simple questions that some of our students would have asked at the time of registration. Is big salary much more important than job satisfaction?
I wish I knew the answer. I don't know. But I know only one thing, which I think is important as a recruiter. I've always told employees. For example, employees come and ask me, how much increase should I get when I change my job? Right? It's a good question. Some people said, give me 50%, somebody said 80%. And I think I only reminded them of a story of a Marwadi gentleman told me when he hires senior managers. So in the interview process, he'll ask them, okay, Mr. Prasad, how much money do you want? He'll say, I want this, I want this, I want this. He'll write down everything. Right? Okay, Prasad, I'll give you, no problem, go. After 1 year, he'll produce the sheet in front of him. I said, this is what you asked, I gave you. Please, right-hand side, you write what you did, what you delivered against this. Right? You write it now. Last time I wrote for you, you wanted something, I paid you. In other words, the problem in compensation has always been, it's never linked to contribution. It is linked to entitlement. I'm qualified, I worked here, last salary was so much. So it's never based linked to contribution. And this, I think, is the biggest challenge for all of us, right? So I think going forward, most of our systems of assumptions about human behavior, about salary, if I get a good salary, the question is not how much salary I'm getting, how long can I hold on to that salary, right? If you get a 100% increase, like today IT industry, people are getting 80%, 100% hike. And the entire IT industry is saying, okay, better you go, wait for 6 months, the market changes. I will ask the same question, I paid 80%, you got a job of 80%, show me what you're delivering. And the skills have not gone up, the competencies have not gone up with an increase in salary. They think because they are smart in negotiation, they can get a higher salary, but you cannot sustain it. And if a higher measurement models are there in performance, for example, what we discussed, micro measurements, etc., the bluff will come out much faster. So I see a very serious problem. Many people will be unemployed. There will be a lot of break in between jobs, which will come because people have voted themselves into high salaries and not looked at whether they can deliver. Now, I'm not even coming to job satisfaction. Job satisfaction is separate. I think job satisfaction in my mind is a very vague topic because in this context of a short duration of cycle time, work for 2 years, 3 years with you, all the job satisfaction theories are not as important. Am I contributing? Am I making money? Is the company enabling me to maximize my performance? That is the job of the company, right? I need the tools. I need that kind of people to work with. So that is more important. Otherwise, work-life balance, all these are very concepts which may not matter going forward when you are not having a permanent job in a work from office kind of work environment.
Great, sir. I think a lot of answers out there. So the second question is, how should an MBA students plan their first job?
Yeah, I think, in fact, I have been doing a series of videos. I think I should tell your students also to watch. It's called Clan Convo series, Career Convo series. We will actually type it in the URL. I'm making a series of 100 videos on short micro videos of 4 minutes to 5 minutes, how to select the right first job, which has been my biggest contribution. My book, first book on how to find the right first job, was a bestseller. It sold 35,000 copies. I think ICFAI also, I think some of them bought at that time, I remember. But to me, the single most important decision a student has to make is not to copy what his neighbor is doing on the first job. He has to take it very seriously, analyze what is his personality, what is the job market, which industries are growing, where can he contribute, where he can sustain himself. So the right first job is a very complex question. And most of us make the stupidest mistake of listening to highest compensation based job. People take high compensation and then need, for example, investment banking. Today I was talking to an investment banker. 4 years ago, he was a high flyer. Last 2 years, he said, no deals have been happening in the market. I've been wiped out. My incentives are gone. My annual variable performance pay is zero. They're in the bottom of the heap. Right? So I would strongly advise your students, don't fall for money. Fall for a job where you will learn the most. I always believe that the real learning happens in the first job, not in the university. University gives you some building blocks, but you apply them on the job, and real learning happens when you fail, when you apply some of them and fail, when you learn from the job itself. So the first job should be a place where you learn the maximum, where you learn more about yourself, what you can do, what you cannot do. It's a job which pushes you to the limit of your endurance in terms of working hours. It puts you 14 hours of work. I believe that's the right job for me.
Great, sir. I think fantastic. Don't fall for money. Look for the opportunities of learning which will push your boundaries and maximize your learning potential in that job. I think fantastic. So the next question is, what are the opportunities for MBA students in people analytics? What is expected from them by industry? Is it an industry phenomenon, or we are hearing this for the first time? Or it's going to be the next big thing, therefore the students should be ready for this?
You see, there is a analytics function has been come to every HR role in large companies. Right? So there is a job role for people analytics, not people performance analytics. People analytics are there. They do a lot of analytics on demographics of people, where they come from, which company they joined, where they went. The performance area is still a very black spot now, or a blind spot right now. But who's doing the analytics now? People who do without understanding of HR. They don't understand anything. They come from mathematics background. They come from consumer analytics space and work in this. Because analytics tool they know, but it's not enough to know the tool. So I would say that people analytics will be a very, very, very interesting area. It's a specialist area. It is going to be in short supply. And a person who's going into that role has to be able to understand the concepts of HR, the principles of HR, but more importantly, to suspend judgment until the data reveals what the ground reality is, and then build hypotheses around it. So you will become an expert, and people come and ask you, Mr. Muralidharan, okay, this is what is happening on the ground. What do you think is happening? So I come back and do the analytics and tell you, I think this is what is happening, and this is what you should be doing. Then you become an expert, your internal consultant on the company and HR role. So the analytics function has the capability to become a very powerful consultant. If you look at the old past days, HR was always a consultant in labor laws. If you look at 30 years ago, the managing director will not take a decision because the labor unions will respond. And he doesn't know how to respond to the labor union. So therefore, the HR was a very important function, or personnel was an important function. Today, the function is dead. There's no labor laws, there's no labor issues. But this predictive part of people behavior will come from analytics. So I think it's an important role. I would strongly encourage many of the people in five who are interested in analytics, visualization, for example, it's a brilliant area. Many people don't understand visualization, how to correlate two variables and put them cross together to see how the data is. For example, I give you one graph I showed you about cohorts. You're dividing people into 20%, 40%, 60%, 80% cohort and see how they behave. I showed you one graph where they're horizontal. Now, this cohort building was never done by any company. They never looked at 20% performers as a category and to see their performance. That means you're cutting and dicing it in a different way than everybody. They've diced based on geography, they've diced based on team leaders, never based on cohorts, which is based on a particular performance level they are at the organization and across the company. So there's a lot of imagination, a lot of opportunities in people performance, people analytics. What is
Great, great. I think you have very interestingly captured the kind of opportunities that they have in people analytics. Amazing, sir. So the next question is how to cope up with the rejections that you face in interviews.
Yeah, I think there are one. I firmly believe that this happens in any salesperson. Forget about interviews. The first thing you learn in sales is rejection. And there are only, I think, in my mind, 2-3 ways of looking at it. Every rejection tells you something about you. Every interview failure tells you something about you. And I want to just tell you a small story to say about my rejection so that you can understand. I went to Hindustan Lever after IIT, and this was the most prestigious job on campus. Unilever, Hindustan Lever's engineering graduate training. And I was selected among 3 people from IIT Madras. 3 of us went all the way to Bombay. I was the only chemical engineer. So if somebody told me, Dr. Ganguly, who was the vice chairman at that time, he's a very cantankerous guy. So make sure you're prepared completely on your subject. So I used to mug it up. I really did a fantastic job preparing on the subject. And I went to the interview, final interview in Bombay, in Hindustan Lever House. And after all the preliminaries, my interview came. And I was the first person to call into a board of 13 people on the board. And looking at my subject, I written something in my resume about my summer training. Nowadays, a lot of people do summer training without going there. I also didn't go. The summer training and I went just for the namesake. I put something there and he picked it up. And he said, Mr. Muralidharan, you went for summer training in this Trichy distilleries and chemicals. Can you tell me what did you do? I had the guts to tell him, sorry, sir, I didn't do anything. I was eating vada and having a good, because the 3rd year summer training, it's not important. Then he asked me, can you draw the diagram of the, how does the reactor look like? I have not seen it. So I didn't know what to write. Then I put one diagram, square diagram. He said, what is this? Then he said, this is a schematic diagram of a reactor. I said, Mr. Muralidharan, don't be smart. Show me the diagram. Then he asked me, put an inlet curve, put outlet curve. I did everything he told me to do patiently. Then he took the paper from his hand, right hand, and he showed it to everybody. Gentlemen, can you, any of you recognize what this is? Everybody are looking shocked. Then he said, look like my tiffin box. My interview ended. I was the first person to come out from the interview. I was very upset because I thought I wanted to get the job, but I reflected on it. I realized the mistake was I should have been candid to tell him, sorry, sir, I didn't do anything. And I would have gone on to some other subject. I would have learned how to pass. So the mistake that you do in every interview failure tells you something about you. If you take that view, then obviously failures are okay because I think the most of the students, including initially I had a fear of what is called a poverty mindset. Poverty mindset means if I don't get this job, I won't get any other job. This is how the mindset of students are, which actually is not true. A lot more jobs will come. You may not see the vacancy right now. For example, in the placement season, people see some 25 jobs are listed. They don't know what the next 25 jobs are, but they panic as if the 25 jobs, I must get it at any cost. People compete and fight and get the wrong job. Right? So I think we should encourage our students not to think the world is coming to an end. We're already talking about recovery now. You all must have seen the papers. I think there's a recovery on the card. I think one of the students of IIT, I think got 2.3 crores. That's the story I saw yesterday. So I think we are not in bad time as far as the placement season is concerned. You need to be very self-aware. You should think seriously where you want to go and go after those jobs, and don't get worried about rejections. Each of the interview experience, take it as a personal learning experience.
Great pearls of wisdom over there for the young students. Each interview tells a lot about you, something that we should not focus about. You will learn about yourself. But probably if you are more self-aware, you will choose the path that you have to. I think that's a very good advice, sir. And one last question in the cluster is, this is about the work that you do, but then the question has come, how do recruiters identify the best talent from the recruiter point of view?
Oh, I think the most of the recruiters have a very limited role in identifying the best candidate. We normally put the best 4 or 5 as we see, and the customer actually decides. We don't decide the final selection. But how do we select the 4 or 5? I think that's a good question, because to my mind, we are being paid to make a lot of processes and steps. For example, I'll tell you only one process we follow for senior level hiring. We do a lot of CEOs and high level positions. We have developed something called a candidate cast form, candidate assessment sheet, where each and every employee, each and every candidate, we ask him a huge list of questions related to the job role and what he's going to do. And we encourage a lot of self-discovery. For example, people write, I worked in this company, I did this job role. So then we drill down and say, what is the budget? How much was the turnover? What is the growth you did? How many people are reporting to you? So we'll drill down the facts of what he claims in the resume to a great details of facts and circumstances. So this helps in figuring out what the candidate claims and what actually is really the growth, right? So our job is most of the time trying to figure out the validity of his claims made by the candidate. And we do that with multiple instruments. We do reference checks. But finally, we go back with 4 or 5 candidates, which is ultimately the customer selects.
Great. Thank you very much for giving an insight into the process that you follow, especially at the higher level, CEO and the leadership level kind of recruitment. Yes, the recruiters identify 4 or 5 best and the customer finally selects one of them. Thank you very much, sir. We have actually completely spent the time that we actually asked from you. It is closer to 9 p.m. We are going to end this, sir, but I will take one question from the chat box. There looks like there is a 5th class student who is writing on behalf of her father. He must read. The question is, how do you develop skills? How to develop skills? How to do skilling? I think in the interest of the age of the respondent, I think we should reply to this question, sir. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, I think we have a skill company of our own. One of the 3 companies I run, it's called Tmi Academy, and we have been in especially graduate skilling space, right? See, I think the skilling is normally seen as something like, analytics. Everybody says analytics is a skill, or the skills are related to something outside of you, right? Something you can do. But to me, real skilling happens when you engage with that role, right? I told you last time, most of the skills are only useful when you practice that job. Otherwise, it's a knowledge base. Skilling is a knowledge. Many people think that I know this. Yeah. Many people are. So skilling really happens when a person gets into a job and practices what he has learned. Skilling is not knowledge. And there's a lot of confusion between knowledge and skilling. And a good example is somebody like me. I came out of IIT and I can't change a light bulb properly. So I'm a third-rate person as far as the engineering skills are concerned, right? I can't do. That's the reality. So skilling, when you look at skilling, you should look at part of it is knowledge, part of it is attitude. But the most important thing is practice of that skill, of that knowledge into an actual job context with a lot of pressure on performance. For example, apprenticeship team. Does it give you skills? In my mind, no, it doesn't give you skills because you're not in pressure of performance. Only the pressure of performance brings out the pressure on you to apply that knowledge and bring the skills. So skilling, in my mind, is beyond knowledge. It's beyond attitude. It's something you learn and then practice. And then that is skilling.
skilling is beyond knowledge and attitude. It is something which you practice and apply. That's great, sir. That's wonderful statement to actually close this Q&A session. There are lots of questions still.
Sure, Sudhakar Garu, I don't mind another 10 minutes if there are any important questions people have asked, because they've all come here and spent a lot of time. Is there any questions you want to ask? I don't mind 15 minutes.
That's fantastic, sir. That's fantastic. I think we will open it up for a few people who would like to ask directly.
Yes.
Anybody can volunteer, and then we will see. Make sure that you don't repeat the question, ladies and gentlemen.
Muralidharan sir, just I wanted to ask one thing. Like what happens in any of sales and marketing, when you talk about like any performance, it totally depends on how your line manager is and what content is given. As you were giving some example of banking sector and SME loan and all. See, when you move down to SME loan or any kind of loan, what happens? There is a corporate DSA and small DSA. Corporate DSA is not given to you. It is taken by either by the line manager, and rest 10 of the people are moving around and creating their own DSAs.
Right.
Now, what happens? Your regional managers say the performance is not coming from this fellow or that fellow. Right. My point of concern is when the resource, equitable resource is not given to a person, how you can judge that measurement, how you can quantify that performance. That is the main bone of contention in corporate world. What happens all the power is either with the regional manager or somebody who is sitting centric, and he is not allotting that resources equitable to all the employees over there. That is the biggest problem in the corporate world, and that most of the employee down the line is facing. See, number of times it has been escalated to HR or something like this. There are a lot of goal settings that is also being done, but that goal setting is meaningless when it comes down to giving out the resources. When you talk about different performance metrics, like there are a lot of things like extra edge, NPF is there, where prospecting is done, everything is given out to you, and it's measurable also. Even if you're working from home, NPF or any tool like extra edge is a kind of tool where you can measure the performance and everything is given. Suppose somebody is doing marketing of Northeast or doing Bihar from Delhi NCR with his NPF and all, and everything is going to you and it is coming in the form of performance. But what happens generally when somebody is sitting at the center, they don't show it to the people. They don't give that ownership. Problem. What most?
Ashutosh, I've understood.
Yeah.
Ashutosh, I'll answer the point. I think a very valid point to
Yeah.
make. See, what you said is what I said earlier. First of all, we can only compare performance of people with the same job responsibilities and the same disadvantages, what you talked about. For example, when you compare performance, you can't compare performance of type A employee with a type B employee who are doing different roles. So when we talked about this graph, we talked about people doing the same job role with the same disadvantage across the country. That's the graph I showed you. That is point number one. Second one, which I also said, the biggest problem with manager is no manager wants to demonstrate to subordinate that he can show him how to do it. He never tells him how to do it. He tells him, I don't care. I don't know what you do. I want this outcome. This is the single reason why attrition rates are very high now in this space, right? See, if I'm your boss, my job is to tell you, where are you failing? I should come with you and walk the market and tell you, okay, you're not able to afford DSA. Let me help you. Let me go work with you. You have to lead by example. What has happened, most of the managers now, especially the younger managers, they have become successful in some portion of it. They come to a higher role. They don't understand the importance of their role as a coach, as a leader of the younger people. So this is absolutely happening. But what I mentioned in my context is always people with the same level, same job role, same entry criteria, and the same kind of a target adjustment. For example, you said NCR versus Bihar. When you talk about performance, it's always performance against targets. So the targets are adjusted based on the geography. So when we talk about 110% of the target is what we compare. So a lot of normalizations are done in the graphics, which I presented to you. But the fact remains, and I agree with you totally, that today's bosses are not leading from the front. They're not telling people why they're not performing. They're not coaching them how to perform. They only say, I don't care, otherwise quit. And that's why attrition rates are 80% and 90% in company.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. We can take one more question, I think, from the audience, if anybody is volunteering. Thank you, Ashutosh. That was very good.
For my own consumption and also for the benefit of younger people in the audience, the skill part is fairly clear. But in terms of attitude and character one needs, what has fundamentally changed in the post-COVID world, and what does one need to work on individually?
Navneet, I think you've got a very valid point. To me, for us, for example, TMI, we were on survival diet during the first 6 months of COVID. As a company, our market, our entire volume of turnover came back from 100 to 0. So what happened? This happens to employees also. Suddenly, they have gone into a zone which they are not familiar with. For TMI, we had to fight. We said we have to say 2 ways. One, shut down the company and go home. Second, treat this as an opportunity and try and redesign, rewire our company completely to become a digital company. And that's what we did. So what happened to many of the employees in the especially younger age group? For the first time, they realized that they are vulnerable in the job market. And I think many of the people who are very overconfident, or they said, no, nothing will happen to me, suddenly discovered they were in the crossroads of facing exactly job death as a category. So now when insecurities increase among people about job stability and job security, I found that many of the employees were more akin or more likely to grab and trying to become more selfish. So I think what COVID has done is to make employees far more selfish. And their engagement with companies, their loyalty to companies are not a priority anymore. This is what I have felt in my little bit of exposure. I do a lot of job fairs now, Navneet. You remember Hindu, we started it in 2000. I do a lot of job fairs with the Hyderabad police every month. We meet a lot of youngsters coming in. I meet and talk to them. I find there's a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. Of course, there's one set is the IIT guy getting 2.3 crores. He is not a sample of interest. But the real sample of majority of the people, of youngsters who are working and not working, they become far more scared about the future. They are more about holding on to whatever they can get and try and become selfish. Does it answer your question, Navneet?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Navneet, for raising that question. Anybody else? And then we can wrap it up otherwise.
Sir, Murli sir, my question is regarding employer branding. There was a lot of work which was going on in the field of employer branding prior to COVID. And during this COVID, there has been unprecedented trends happening in the field of HR. And now we know the great resignation movement which is going on across the IT industry. So is employer branding as such making an impact? Is it worth investing the time and efforts of organization in creating their own employer brands? How efficient it would be, sir?
Yeah, very, very good question, Sweta. You may not know, Navneet will also agree with me, TMI was the first company to build employer branding in India. In 2000, we had a partnership with Hindu, and we did a lot of print advertising. We brought it to online. And I think TMI was the first company to sign up with a company called Career Mosaic and Bernard Hodes, which is the world's largest employer branding agency, in 2000. So your question is very valid. In the IT industry today, companies used to build brands by talking about infrastructure they provided to employees, or what kind of benefit program they had for employees. For example, many companies have beautiful campuses. They used to show off the campuses. I used to go to Infosys to see the beautiful campus environment. But today, what is happening in the IT industry? Everybody doing 2 jobs. They don't want to go back to the company. Many companies are saying our offices are empty, despite the best infrastructure they built, best benefit program they built. Like I said, told Navneet, they become so selfish. The relationship between the employer and the employee has changed completely in IT industry. They're not asking the question, this is a good company to work for. They're saying, what can I do today? How much money can I make today? How much I can maximize my earning potential? So they have become very matlabi, very, very selfish, and that's the reality. So in that context, what is the relevance of employer branding? I think that's the question. Do we build brands now? My answer is today, whatever employer branding story you tell, nobody is interested. They want to know what is the salary, what is the increase in salary. So I would not invest any time and money on employer branding right now. I probably wait for this whole thing to madness to reduce in 6 to 8 months, and then I will rethink about my employer branding strategy. But otherwise, right now, it doesn't make any sense. Navneet, do you agree with me? You're an Hindu and you're seeing all the employer advertising also.
Yeah, agree, Murli. Yes.
I think Hindu is a pioneer in appointment advertising for a long time, and they really see the pulse of what's happening on the ground.
But sir, organizations and employees, they are also talking about displaying a higher level of empathy in such times. So don't you think like certain subtle factors needs to be branded in such times, sir?
No, what you're saying is companies have become empathetic. I agree with you, but employees are not, right? So you're not in the business of trying to be empathetic to employees who are not empathetic to you. So you can do. I think many companies like we also did a lot of things for our employees, but they may not reciprocate. And I think if I expect that in a context like this, the problem is with me, right? This is the reality on the ground. So I would say that I'm not saying companies should become mercenary. I'm not saying that. I'm only saying that companies will continue to do whatever they are doing to do. But if they think it will give you competitive advantage to talk about it as an employer brand, this is not the time.
Murli, if I may add to that, with
Yeah,
your permission.
Yeah.
Companies as a role, companies have a duty to be empathetic. Leaders have a duty to be empathetic. But what I have done for myself in the companies, while all our employer branding initiatives continue, I have divorced metrics from that. I said for 18 months, those will not be related to metrics. We will do that because it's a good thing to do. But we'll have zero expectations from what it will do for us.
Absolutely, Navneet, I concur with you completely. Hindu has been probably the best employer in terms of being empathetic. They've always built the union and relationships we built over years. But nothing matters now. Employees are not concerned. I think they are mercenary right now because this is the right time to be mercenary. I don't know whether I will also be, if in that age group I was there, I will also be mercenary. Right? I would say if we can make good money, why not? Very, very few people will have the character to say that this is not the time to take advantage of the employer. And many employers, including us, including many of us in this room, feel very shortchanged that you have done so much for employee. And I can give you several examples of employees where we went out of the way, put everything at stake and help the employee. When the opportunity came to increase their salary, they just said, thank you very much, sir. You're a nice guy, but I got a better job. So that's the way life is.
Great points. Thank you, sir. So I want to wrap it up. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard from one of the best thought leaders that we have today with us, Mr. Muralidharan. He is not just an IIT alum or IIM alum who is speaking as a professional, but he himself is the first-gen entrepreneur, in fact, a serial entrepreneur. And when somebody says we need to either abolish or completely change the way we do performance appraisal or review systems, that is something very big. If Mr. Muralidharan says that we need to completely stop, at least for a short term, the employer branding, given the changing scenario of how the employees are reacting and their relationship with the organizations. Yes, these are very, very big, unconventional stands taken by the speaker today that we have. And that is the whole purpose of bringing in the guests like Mr. Muralidharan. And the show is called WiseViews Interactive Webinar Series. Befittingly, we've got many pearls of wisdom from Mr. Muralidharan. He has actually given a fantastic picture of how the world of HR, the world of work is changing in terms of the trends, the automation, in terms of the composition of the workforce, in terms of working from home itself, and then who are actually dominating this workforce in terms of the Gen Z or the youngest Gen Y that is dominating the phlegm part of the workforce. So if you understand this changing trend or understanding these emerging trends, then we plan for the change very, very nicely. And a lot of concepts have been turned on their head in terms of how we look at it from the past to how we should look at it in future. A lot of mathematical models, data science, relationships, correlation in terms of looking at how we can predict the performance. That has been the core takeaway of this entire session. I am extremely thankful for bringing in such forceful concepts, such fantastic issues that you have discussed. We would like to request you to come back to us, sir, and I think a long discussion at the campus in person is required. I'm sure Professor Prasad will agree with me and will facilitate that sooner at a convenient time for you. But definitely, this is going to inspire, and completely you have rebranded the way perception of HR among the MBA students within various campuses today that's prevailing. So very, very interesting and very thankful for that insightful presentation and making this change of perception among the students who are listening to you and also various practitioners in other functional areas, including me. I think this has been an eye-opener and this has been a fantastic session for us. We have actually got much more than what we have asked for. We are grateful to you. Our Vice Chancellor has joined for some time and listened to some of the concepts that you presented. Many senior people also have attended today, and I'm sure we'll go back and write a summary and we'll share that summary with you, the kind of learnings and takeaways we have had. And this session is recorded, sir. This recorded session after editing will be uploaded on the archives. We'll share a link with you of the YouTube, and some questions which are not answered now, probably we'll collect and email it to you so that you can respond to that whenever you are free by email. So thank you very much, sir, for this valuable time, insightful discussion and wonderful conversations that you have spurred today. And you have made our 33rd webinar a blockbuster webinar discussion for this evening on Friday. Thank you very much, sir. And
I think one closing comment, I think we are doing an event on the 9th of this month. I've got 3 big speakers on the similar topic that I've discussed with you. 2 of them are, one is, I think, the promoter of Big Basket, Mr. Hari Menon, and we're getting 2 top people from the industry, one from Fevicol, and they're going to discuss the same performance management issues. Whatever we raised here, it's going to be their voice. I want to listen to them. I'm one of the speakers, but the other 3 speakers, the TMI organized event. I will send you the link and you can invite anybody who's interested in this topic to validate whatever I said, maybe from industry leaders. There are 3 of them. The topic is identical. There's people of performance management. That's what we're going to talk about. So your faculty, students who want to come, they're welcome. And will you post it on the link? How will you send it to them, all of them?
yeah, you can post it now here and later you can share it with me.
We'll post it on the chat, the invitation itself. And our office also will send it to you and you can send it to all the people who came today for the event.
Sure.
Now, I can tell you that only closing comment is that these are disruptive times. And I told you we can't use last old data and old hypothesis. That is dead. And that is good news because renewal happens only when we declare something dead. And then only we can build. Otherwise, we hang on to the past. And TMI 2.0, we are doing exactly this. We are just writing off a lot of our past and rewriting our future. That's going to be a digital company. We're going to have a very small office. I think after COVID also 80-70% of our employees will work from home. We will have the largest gig force in India, and the ratio that we're talking about 300 to 1,000. We're already 1:3 right now. So every single area we are saying we'll re-question the way TMI is run for the last 30 years and rebuild a new TMI. Thank you very much. I think
Great, sir. Great, sir. Thank you very much.
Sent to me, and I'm very grateful.
I read your books. Those books are also very interesting. I'll share the titles with some of our students as well when I'm writing to them along with this invitation. But definitely we'll come back to you to invite you to our campus to actually have a very, very good in-person interaction with them whenever it's convenient to you. So thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next Friday at the same time, 7:30 p.m. Dr. Mukund Rajan, brother of Raghuram Rajan, is going to be the next speaker. He's talking about the corporate India and the new focus on ESG. That is going to be the topic for the next session. So please stay tuned, and we would like to have a wonderful conversation again with yet another distinguished thought leader. So see you next Friday. Thank you all. Do take care.